Good evening. I'm calling to order the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee meeting for Tuesday, October 4th. We are in the council chambers of City Hall. Item number 2 is to identify any potential conflicts of interest. You have the agenda before you. Does anybody wish to identify any potential concern? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 3, citizens' comments. Are there any citizens that wish to make comments? Citizens' comments. Third and last call for citizens' comments. Moving on to number 4, consent agenda, including the minutes of the September 20, 2022 meeting, bills and payroll, monthly position control report, report of personnel actions, the July Treasury report, and the August Treasury report. Mr. Hendler, what's your wish? We have a motion by Mr. Hendler to approve the consent agenda as presented. We have a second by Mrs. Spiros. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Number 5, we have nothing to discuss, that nothing was removed. Number 6, request to recommend council approval to refill a vacant police officer position presented by Jody Gearing, police chief.
And I do not see him. I don't know if there was some confusion between.
He's on Zoom.
Oh,
He's on Zoom. Okay.
Oh, hi, Jody. There's no confusion.
Hey, Steve,
Only confusion in my mind.
You're acting up again. Okay. Hello. Thank you all very much for letting me appear virtually. I approached the body because on August 30th, Officer Flynn resigned from our police department, leaving a vacancy in patrol. We operate with 40 sworn officers. With the vacancy, we're down to 39. I approached Police and Fire Commission on September 15th. They approved that I fill the vacancy and approach this body for approval. With that, I asked for your approval to fill a vacancy to bring us back up to full staff.
Mr. Wagner. Motion to approve by Mr. Wagner, seconded by Mrs. Tompkins. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. You have a new officer approval going to the council.
Thank you very much.
All right, number 7, request to recommend council authorization to execute a 5-year agreement for professional financial audit services with Clifton Larson Allen, LLP, CLA, presented by Jennifer Zelensky, Finance Director. Jennifer.
Okay, as you are aware, we went through an RFP process to contract for a audit services for the next 5 years. Responses were sent out. The evaluation team evaluated the single response that was received timely, which was by CLA. So we're asking as the selection committee to bring forward to accept their proposal and request that we be authorized to execute an agreement with CLA. I would point out that it's not the agreement that we put in the packet. That was a mocked up version of the agreement from 2013. Since then, auditing standards and their professional guidance has issued new contracting language in terms of a master service agreement, which they would like to present to us, which would encompass a lot of the same things that you would find in this following agreement. Details out what you may have recognized as an engagement letter or the agreement for services in the past. So it's a new process, new forms. So we'll be working through those forms should we be approved to move forward with accepting their RFP and executing an agreement, which will now need to be negotiated with between our attorney and CLA based on the new forms that that includes their new requirement.
Yes, Mr. Barg.
Could I just make one more comment before discussion by the group? And that is, that changes a little bit of things, what Jennifer just said. But also, what you had in the packet, there was another piece that the city attorney added in the last 48 hours. And you've seen this before with respect to Central Wisconsin State Fair and others. It's a piece that talks about open records requests and that the provider will be responsible for maintaining the records and providing them as necessary to fulfill said requests. That's become standard in some of our agreements in the last 2 or 3 years with contractors and consultants.
Okay. Mr. Wagner. We have a motion by Mr. Wagner to go ahead and move this on to council for approval. Second by Mr. Hendler. Any discussion? I do have one quick question.
Yes.
Are we doing this in conjunction with the utility? Is it forced in conjunction with the utility? Can we do different options or when we did the banking services, they approved their contract, we approved our contract, but we kind of worked together to get the information. Is this a similar situation or is it locked into, we're both on the same?
It is not locked in. We are both required to choose the same provider. They were a part of that selection committee and are planning to recommend CLA to their commission for approval as well.
Okay, because I noticed that the general manager of utility is on the signature line along with everybody in the city. So didn't know if it was a locked in, we have to do the same thing or independent.
I believe it'll be independent. I believe with the new forms coming from CLA for the master service agreement that they would execute an agreement as well.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? All right, we have a motion to recommend council approval of the 5-year agreement with CLA for the professional financial audit services. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Moving on to number 8, request to recommend council approval to solicit proposals for property revaluation services using a request for proposal or RFP presented by Steve Bard, City Administrator.
Thank you. I'll be not reading from my memo, but I'll be hitting a lot of the points you've already seen if you've read my staff memo. The assessment ratio for the city, that's the relation between the assessed value and the equalized value that the state sets, has now been below 90% for 3 years. After a 4th year, the state would be mandating that the city go through a revaluation. Revaluation is important because it helps sort of reset the property's values, and it makes sure that everyone who owns property in the city is getting fair and uniform assessments and paying their fair share of the property tax bill. The last one that was done in 2010, and it's clearly outdated as we've identified. Here we are 12 years out and falling behind. Historically, the most common approach that cities and villages have used for revaluation has been sort of called a full revaluation. That's where the assessors have been trying to get into every single property in the city, try to make access to all the homes, get a chance to look around, see what's changed, what's different, does it comply or does it conform to what they see on their property record cards. In recent years, that's become harder because the state passed a law and says that the property owners no longer need to allow you to enter their properties. In fact, they don't have to allow you to enter or be on your premises, walking around, looking at the exterior necessarily. So that's made it more challenging to do a full revaluation. There's another modified version of a full revaluation where they, assessors try to do exterior of all the properties in the city. And again, like I said, that can be a problem in the sense that you're not allowed to be on their property per se either. So there's another option called the intermediate revaluation, and that's more of a statistical reval. And that allows us, I sound like I'm an assessor, I'm obviously not my profession, but allows for a sort of resetting to the correct values based upon class and some other things that they look at to make sure that different types of structures, different types of homes are being looked at in a fair and similar value based upon the criteria that they would usually use to assess and determine values of homes. There would still be the need to go out and do a little bit of exterior looking from time to time on some parcels, and certainly looking on recent sales that will dictate some of that activity as well. But a lot of it is without being in the field. It's done more internally. There are 2 good reasons to do that. The first is that the full cost of a full revaluation is very expensive. We've talked in this room before about as much as $500,000 being what's charged for a full revaluation where you attempt to get into every property in the city. So that's obviously quite costly. The other, as I mentioned before, is because of the recent change in state law, you're lucky to get into maybe it sounds like even a third of the properties because they're not required to allow you access. And quite frankly, if you have not been doing the things you're supposed to in terms of pulling building permits and stuff, you're unlikely to be someone who's going to gain, to give voluntary access to the assessor to walk into your home. So there's a reason to look at doing the statistical or the intermediate revaluation. Staff is recommending that we go this route and recommending that the committee recommend council approval of the request for proposals that you have in your packet to look for qualified firms to do an intermediate revaluation. The only change to what you have in the packet was identified by a member of Steve's staff, and that is Item 4F should be the year 2023. I think it says 2024. The intent is that they complete the work, whoever this firm is, for tax year 2023 before it's over, before it's closed out, and that be worked into their proposals. With all this in mind, I've admitted I'm not a professional, I'm not an expert in this field, so I have talked with Steve Shepro. He's agreed to come here tonight. He does our maintenance contract with the city. He's our city assessor with forward appraisal for the sole purpose of answering any questions that you might have about what an interim revaluation is, what it consists of, how it's done, and the validity of that type of approach. Otherwise, I take any questions from the body at this time. But the recommendation is to recommend council approval to solicit proposals for the interim revaluation using a request for proposal that's in your packet.
Mr. Wagner.
Yeah, it strikes me as when we went for the most recent contract, there was some discussion about the city's use of a program called Market Drive. Is that, and I noticed in the RFP, they're asking, they're also asking that basically Market Drive be used here too, or they're designating that in here. Are we going to have trouble soliciting bids from, is that proposal or is that software widely used? Is it readily available to, or is there something else out on the market that we might have to come to grips with?
I'll start that, and then Steve, if you want to comment, that's fine. Market Drive is still the most prevalently used software across the state. At one time, I know they said more than 60% of the cities and villages across the state were using Market Drive. So we're hopeful that most consultants can adapt to that and use that. We certainly don't want them conflicting or trying to use software that isn't the same as Market Drive.
Can you step up to the podium and talk, please, for the benefit of those at home? Thank you.
Number of the companies that are evaluation, they will. Oh, it is, okay. But basically what they will do is they will adjust anything they do to make it work in Market Drive. And since the city's already on Market Drive, that's why it was recommended that way.
So we're not going to run into any, we're not going to limit ourselves by designating Market Drive.
Not at all. Actually, the Village of Plover just got done doing one, an outside company did it. They do it on their own program. They actually had to work in Market Drive because that's what they use, and they did the reval on Market Drive. So
thank you.
It's not a problem.
Mrs. Tompkins?
Thank you. So this intermediate assessment, what are the, like where are you getting the data from? Is it from the known square footage? Is it by sort of the homes in the neighborhood? Like how do they, if you can't get in and you can't look at the exterior, are you just like pulling records from before, or they will, not you?
Well, what we do here is with Keith and stuff, what we do is we do, all the permits throughout the year. So we are on the property doing that in and out of them. And then also we have about 300 or 400 sales every year that are arm's length transactions. So we use that to model the program. And we've already started some of that for Keith to work with right now. So whatever firm would come on to do that, that's what they would just continue on. And yes, we would use the information that's already on the records. The sketches are all there. That's all in Market Drive already. The commercial's the only one that has to be put in there yet. Then we're done. Actually, I did all them back when Joan was here. All the commercials were done on Marshall and Swift, their own program. That's a commercial module. And so they were all on there. So when they moved over, I guess the decision was not to download all the stuff into the system. So we got a key punch. That's what we're trying to do now in the head of the reval. So it'd make it a lot easier, that's all. But the information's there. I'm pretty comfortable with it. And I think any company would be, so.
Mr. Wagner, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a real quick one. Are there any, I'm trying to use the word glitches, that can occur by using this less invasive method, the market-driven one that you're using? I mean, is there anything there that can come back and bite us as far as the state requirements for the audit go?
Well, there's always possibilities of a reassessment, and that would be by the public coming out and actually doing a petition and basically requiring it. They don't feel you have equity between properties, but that would matter no matter how you do the reval. That happens when the reval just wasn't done right. So there's really not, I mean, I can't say there's never is. The one thing you don't want to do, and that's why I think what Steve put in there for 2024, that would be your drop dead year. If you're not in compliance by 2024, the state would step in and it would be quite a bit more money. But what happens by doing it in 2023, and we're in this situation now with a community, it's a pretty good large community, and they weren't aware, we just started on this year with them, and they weren't aware that they needed to have a reval by this year yet. So we went from doing just the maintenance to basically doing a full-blown reval on it, an intermediate one, just to get them back in compliance. So that's the biggest thing is they don't have an option. If we don't get them back in compliance, they would still get ordered a reval next year. So you want to save that extra year. That's very important, so.
Thank you.
Mrs. Spiros, did you have a question?
Yes. Pardon my ignorance, but I'm just still trying to figure out how it works, much like I think you were asking so many questions. Give me an example of how you would change the evaluation of somebody's house based on what you're seeing in online or in your computer system.
Or from the windshield of a car.
What was that?
Or from the windshield of a car, essentially.
Yeah, like if you can't enter, like I just don't understand the process, I guess.
Well, I think for the years doing this, you start to notice the inside's done or the outside's done. You can tell a lot of that. And we do have pretty good records. I mean, the updates, I think from years back, they've always been updated. But you're never perfect. But we find out that the people that don't take out permits also don't let people into the house. So you will never have them. And so there's nothing you can do. But we do a little different there. We do estimate. We do it with, we look at multiple listings. We have tons of multiple, that's all we do all day long is look at multiple listings. And it tells us, okay, they're trying to sell it, here's what it is. So we're always updating that. And if things change, we send them a letter to try to get through it. If they don't, we just update that information. Now, one of the things is I don't add without having some idea what's going on. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's fair to people. But what we probably try to do the most is just trying to get, when you do mass appraisal, it's more about the overall modeling than it is any one property. So you know, most of the ranches out here, most of the Cape Cods, most of the Colonials, you start to get a model for this, and it really does really well. We're just finishing up on the one in Green Bay right now. We're in open book period right now, and that was all an interim one. That was not out reviewing them at all.
So do most of the elements of the model you're talking about, do they include like the size of the home, the style of the home, the age of the home?
Yep, and conditions, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, all that's part of it. And then, you know, basically sales on the same, that's what we do from year to year. Now, it's been very difficult the last 3 years because the increase in values have been so dramatic comparably.
Right.
And, you know, that part of it worries me because that's not going to matter if you do a full one or not. It's just going to be an increase, you know. People don't, you know, they don't really worry about the dollar amount. They worry about taxes, you know. And so they don't look at the assessed value as much as they do the actual taxes. So that's what we're trying to get that confidence in them that, you know, that they were done fairly and stuff like that. That's what you try to do on a revaluation and put it back. I don't think it would be that difficult. Madison, Milwaukee do this only because of their size. They don't do a full reval ever. They just basically update every year based on the information they have, and they constantly do that. So.
Thank you.
All right, so what's your pleasure? Mrs. Tompkins, is your microphone on?
I motion that we send out an RFP. Is that what we're doing? Or
So you're recommending that we send this to council approval for the RFP?
I am.
All right. Second by Mr. Wagner. So we have a motion and a second to recommend council approval of the RFP for the reval. You touched on one thing, and I'm assuming the committee doesn't necessarily have any further questions. We asked a bunch, but you touched on one thing, and I think it's important for the public to know this, and I know it's not possibly directly related, but definitely going to be on the minds of people. The reval does not mean taxes are going up. It simply means that the assessed value of the properties is reset, but taxes remain the same. What actually happens is the mill rate drops to maintain the same level of taxes unless the council would make a recommendation to increase taxes. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it's not a panic, oh my goodness, my house is gonna be worth a whole lot more, I gotta pay a lot more. It's simply resetting so that we know where we're really at in terms of the true value.
Yeah, effectively, you're recarving the pie, and now that doesn't mean there won't be some winners and losers, but for the most part, you're just taking the values and putting them where they should be, but the total levy is the total levy.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure the public is aware that we're not looking at a sudden increase in taxes because everything's reassessed. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're on to number 9. Review possible new fees or charges to be assessed for certain fire-related services, introduced by Steve Barg, City Administrator, and presented by Pete Fletty, Fire Chief. Start with Steve.
Thank you. Well, we're in budget season, and that caused me to be talking with department heads, and even before I did, as department and division heads were preparing their budgets back in the summer, we're in a situation right now where we're trying to make sure that we have the revenue to provide the services that the public expects. So there have been various people taking a look at, are we charging the right amounts for various applications, various services we provide, various, things that we do. And as a result of that, Pete took a good look at fire inspection. He's been to a state conference. I think others in his department were there as well, perhaps, where they talked about some of these fees that are being charged by the departments. So just because other departments are charging fees for certain fire services, it doesn't mean that we have to. But the question is whether or not they're warranted, whether or not they're fairly common, and is it something we should be looking at? And I think Pete has done a wonderful job on this memo to bring some items for your consideration and discussion here tonight and see if the committee is interested in pursuing them. So with that, I'll turn it over to our Fire Chief, Pete Fletty.
Chief?
Thank you. So as Steve alluded to, even before he mentioned bringing this up to department heads, this was quite the hot topic at the Fire Chiefs Conference in June of this year, actually. A lot of career departments were starting to explore charging for some of the services they provide. It's been a long-standing tradition that volunteer departments charge for every service they provide, but very rarely have career departments charge for everything they do. But like I said, this was a hot topic at the Chiefs Conference this year. In your packet, I provided a memo. So on page 1, the first thing we did is contact LifeQuest and see what they're billing as far as other services out there and what services they're billing for. So that's the chart on page 1 there. It pretty much lays out all the services that they're billing for currently with other departments. Next thing we did is we called around to other career departments, specifically here in central Wisconsin. And, we found that career departments aren't billing for everything they do, but certainly departments are billing for certain services. So we did from there then is developed our own chart, which is on the last page of my memo in your packet, and just provided a suggested service fee based off of what the information we found by talking to other departments. So regarding the false alarms, that'll be the first chart at the top of the last page there. Regarding the false alarms, so our suggestion, and this is based off of what other departments are doing, is that we bill on a progressive scale. So your first and second false alarms would be considered, accidental. And after that, departments are viewing those as nuisance false alarms. So the third false alarm would be $300. Fourth false alarm would be $400. And the fifth and subsequent false alarms would be $500 each. What we're trying to do with this as well is if you have a fire alarm system and a sprinkler alarm system, those need to be maintained yearly. A lot of times these false alarms will occur because systems aren't being maintained or being updated on a yearly basis. So hopefully that would encourage those that have these systems to keep it updated and maintained. Regarding the fire inspection fee schedule there, we do currently charge for fire inspections, but it's based on a citation basis. And it's a very lengthy process, involves municipal court, calling around to other services and fire departments in our area. What they typically do is bill after a certain number of re-inspections. So with our fee schedule suggestion, what we suggest is that at the third re-inspection that we'd start billing at $50, the fourth re-inspection would be $100, and the fifth and subsequent re-inspections would be $200. Again, we're not looking at billing for just doing fire inspections or even following up on a correction for a violation. We're looking at those ones that we have to go to repeatedly, which involves a lot of staff time, fuel to get there. And same applies for false alarms, right? So fuel costs are going way up. If we have to keep going back to a business because of a false alarm and a alarm system that's not functioning properly, that's just incurring cost to our department. So that's what we're looking at doing. The last chart in the memo is other suggested fees that other departments are currently billing for. Motor vehicle accidents, we'd be looking at billing $500 per accident, and this would be billed directly to the insurance carrier. Same with structure fires and vehicle fires. Also for vehicle extrications, we're looking at a $500 charge, but this would just be for in-city vehicle extrications, which don't occur very often because speeds are slower. We can't bill outside of the city because that falls out of our fire jurisdiction. So at that point, it would be, whatever municipality or village we're working with at that point, they would bill for that, for their services. Lastly, I did notice that LifeQuest did have on the chart there that some departments are billing for carbon monoxide alarms. This is something we absolutely oppose as a department, as we don't want a homeowner weighing the risk of having CO in their home versus incurring a bill. So it's something we definitely oppose doing. With that, I guess that kind of outlines the memorandum I've put forth, and I'll answer any questions you have. And I believe this is for your discretion to approve, disapprove, or do it if you want.
Mrs. Spiros.
Okay, so I have a few questions. When you talk about a motor vehicle accident and you say how many, and you said in the city of Marshfield, this is how many people respond. And I wish I could find the paragraph you had that in. Oh, here. Motor vehicle accidents in the city of Marshfield require the department to respond with an ambulance and an engine, which takes 5 personnel out of service for 1 call. And then you go about saying, if there's another call, we're faced with bringing in people at overtime. So motor vehicle accident, is there, this isn't like fender benders, there must be a certain level of motor vehicle accident you're responding to.
Actually, any motor vehicle accident in the city, we do respond with an engine and an ambulance, because a lot of times, even for the minor fender benders, there is some fluid leakage, and generally we're on scene for that to mitigate that, as well as provide. So what the engine does, it provides protection for our ambulance crew as well. So we'll park that behind the scene at an angle to keep cars away, because I'm sure we've all seen the videos of, unfortunately, first responders being hit. So it also provides that protection for our crews working on that scene.
So you respond to all motor vehicle accidents that way, no matter the severity of the accident?
Correct. The only, there is one instance where we won't respond with an ambulance, and that's if PD is already on scene. They just need an engine there to maybe sweep up glass or put down oil dry or whatever. That's really the only instance in which we'll respond with one or the other.
Okay.
And if I can jump in for a minute, you mean accidents that are reported?
Correct. Yes.
I mean, if Rebecca, if you and I bump into each other out of the parking lot, we exchange insurance. no one's gonna,
Got
Correct.
you. Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so that one so when you say that you would bill $500, you said you would bill that to the motor vehicle carrier's insurance.
Correct.
And what's the, is that something all insurances are accepting now as a billable charge and they're willing to pay on it? Or is that something that's rejected quite frequently?
That I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I can get back to you, but I believe that's what LifeQuest reported to us, is that that's how they do that. They bill the insurance carrier. But I can certainly get back with that. Not have an answer.
Okay, and then the structural fire, that's a $500, you're looking for a $500 fee for that too. So structural fire is that any fire that you're called to in a home?
Correct.
And then is that billable to their home insurance?
Correct, yes.
And how, so I'm going to repeat the same question. You
Yes.
probably don't maybe know the answer now either. But so is that something you're seeing that insurance companies are willing to pay? And how is that billed? Like,
It's in your home.
yeah, in your homeowners. But like, is there like codes that you use? I mean, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how that all works.
We wouldn't actually do the billing, so it would go through LifeQuest. So what they would do is look at our reports. And if they would be able to see if it's an ambulance call or a structure fire or whatever, they would then take it on from there. So I guess that's one thing I did forget to mention, is that through, LifeQuest would be handling all this. We wouldn't necessarily be incurring any extra work or whatever. LifeQuest already has our contract for EMS billing. So they would bill for all this stuff. And these are answers to questions that I can get for you by contacting LifeQuest, but I wasn't prepared to answer that. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to get this
I
straight in my head to understand what
Yep.
we're doing. Now go back up to the false alarm. And so the first and second false alarm are no charge. What, and it kind of sounded like you were mostly talking about businesses when you kept saying, well, they
Yes.
have these things in place. Are you talking about these false alarms charges going to just businesses or residential, both?
I'm mainly referring to businesses because that's where we see our false alarms at. I'm trying to think of a homeowner that we've been to with
It's like
multiple
if
false
somebody's
alarms.
kid calls 911 on accident.
Oh, that's not what I'm referring to. I'm referring to like a sprinkler system alarm or a pull station or something like that.
So in that case, and this is just me, I'm looking at the false alarm charges, and I would encourage you to maybe go up a little bit on those. I mean, if you're responding to a third false alarm and you're $300 doesn't seem, they should fix their stuff.
Agreed.
They have employees in their buildings, they have whoever they have, they should fix it. And on the third time, if they haven't fixed it, that $300.
Sure. We can certainly look at that. And what I did is when I got these numbers is I kind of took the average of what other departments are doing.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's one area I would look at, maybe bumping that up a little bit, because I think like at that point they should have it. And I understand that things happen. You might be at Walmart and somebody could pull the fire, a customer. I mean,
Right.
There's certain ways that maybe you could individually look some of those things through, but I think that there's room that you could probably go up a little bit on those fees. I mean, you're giving them quite a leeway by not even charging until a third false alarm. And then vehicle extrication, or however you say that.
Yes.
Is that Jaws of Life?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, that's all I had.
Any other questions? Mrs. Tompkins?
Thank you. I would agree with Rebecca about upping. I would say you might want to consider too, people who are not in compliance of charging $50 for the fourth inspection. To drive out there probably costs $50 depending.
Correct. Yeah. If
Where
you
you go.
count staff time, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even with staff time, you might be dealing with $300. So maybe relook at that as well.
I can certainly do that.
Any other questions, comments? I guess I have a real quick question. When I read this, I assumed these are yearly timeframes.
Yes.
So it would be the third false alarm in a single year.
Yeah. We'd be looking at calendar years. Yes.
So calendar year, not running 12-month period.
Yeah, I guess when, we developed this, we thought January 1st to December 31st.
Okay, and then one other quick question regarding the motor vehicle. Actually, I guess I have questions. Motor vehicle accident that the vehicle starts on fire and you have to use jaws of life. Is that a $1,500 fee? I mean, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something we can definitely think about. I to be honest with you, I didn't think about that.
Okay. Because I can't think of a vehicle extrication that wouldn't involve an accident. Because, I mean, how did the person get trapped in the vehicle unless they were in an accident? So
Correct.
From those perspectives, I wasn't really certain how that fit. And then to go with the accident thing, I know that when I've called and said, I just witnessed an accident, first thing they ask is, are there injuries? Is that what triggers you guys to come?
A lot of times, yes. So we'll hear over dispatch, yes, accident with injuries. So we will respond to those. And there are times that we get out there and nobody's injured, and that's a good day, right? So,
So the bump on the road where no injuries and the officer gets there when they can and then handles things, that's not anything that they'd be looking at a fee on.
And that's something we can trigger to not charge or,
Okay.
Sorry, I thought I might just be able to clarify a little bit. Thinking like wintertime where there's lots of little accidents.
Yep.
There's quite a few accidents like that where PD gets on scene first. They'll make the judgment then if they need fire EMS. Otherwise, if dispatch finds out from 911 there's an injury, we do get dispatched immediately.
Okay. And then just on the structural fire piece, you said that goes to the homeowner insurance, but in all likelihood, their deductible is higher than that. So it's really going to be directly to the person who owns the property.
And if you think about it as well, I would assume that, any structure fire that's over $500 by state statute, we have to go out and investigate. So there are very few fires that we're finding that do less than $500 damage already as it is. So, this would be just a $500 fee. And that's kind of how we justify that $500 fee, is that our fire investigators are out there hours, if not days, on some scenes. And that's just to recoup some of the staff time because we have to pay overtime for those folks to come in and investigate that fire.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wagner?
Yeah. First of all, on most homeowners policies I've seen, the $500, it used to be just $300. I don't know if it's up to $500 now as a standard for a fire call. But it is not subject to deductible. It's something different.
Okay.
It's a $500 flat fee or a flat payment for a fire call, or $300. I don't know what it is. I haven't looked at my policy recently.
Okay.
The other thing, we used to have a lot of false alarms at a nursing home, at one of the nursing homes here, where it was sort of the sport of the day to flip the fire alarm. But if they had like 3 of those in a month, they would get fined, right?
Correct. Yeah, based on this. And like I said, if like Alderperson Spiros mentioned, if somebody's just pulling a fire alarm, that's not really their fault. They're, pulling a child, for example, is going through a school and pulling fire alarms. I guess we wouldn't necessarily bill for that if it's not really their fault. Or we're trying to target our, alarm systems, sprinkler systems that need to be updated or maintained.
And I guess one last thing, I could see where this would raise some money for you, and the only thing it would do, this is independent of the enterprise fund. This is something that would not help the enterprise fund one bit, but it certainly would reduce the amount of levy that we would spend to the fire department, which could possibly be used to other purposes. How soon do you want to, are you looking to put this in effect? When? January, June next year, what?
Yeah, I was looking at January, but based on some of the conversations here, I think we need to follow up with some adjusted fees and get those to a level that this body agrees to.
Well, thank you.
Again, I think Councilmember Wagner made a good point. I mean, these fees are related to fire, not EMS, but ultimately, some of the conversations we have, we know where that goes in terms of the general fund's involvement in the EMS part, ultimately.
So what's the desire of the committee? Would it be the desire of the committee to have chief come back with updated structure, or to send this to council to be discussed at a council level with updated fees? Mrs. Tompkins.
I move to have this sent to the council with the updated information.
Okay, and a second by Mrs. Spiros. Any further questions, discussion? Just back to your page 1 of your memo, potential revenue, were you figuring, and I didn't grab a calculator to do the calculations on these, but were you figuring those at the current fee schedule, meaning like with I see CO alarms is on there.
Yes.
With like the first reinspection, second reinspection still being free, or, I mean, how did you calculate that?
Yeah, so this chart on the front here is, that came from LifeQuest, just to
Okay.
provide an example of what our 2021 numbers look like. And if we were to charge at the rates that they're suggesting,
Okay.
that's the potential revenue.
So that's not what we're looking.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
On to number 10, suggested items for future agendas, Mr. Wagner.
Oops, thank you. Thank you, sir. It's been some time now since I had asked the committee to recommend and work with the creation of an audit committee. I'd like to ask that we put it on the next agenda for the purpose of determining whether we want the city attorney to draft an ordinance creating the audit committee.
Okay, and that'll be then proposed for 2 weeks from today.
That's fine. I thought that process was already underway. I didn't know if there were discussions with the city attorney going on.
Yeah, it's been pretty well vetted by him, so I think he can defend whatever's in there now.
Okay. Anything else? Seeing no further items on the agenda and no further items for future agendas, that all our business is complete, I declare this meeting adjourned.